Good afternoon. Welcome to the pre-party for Wednesday, October 9th. Before we get into our new content, I just want to wrap up our discussion that we had at Altitudes this morning. I hope you enjoyed it. The reason I wanted you to spend some time outside of the class and in Altitudes Restaurant and Brewery is to first help you become more acquainted with Laramie and its community, especially for those of you who aren't from Laramie. If you haven't had a chance to eat or hang out at Altitudes, I would recommend it. Hopefully you have more insight as to what they do and what they have to offer after visiting today. Secondly, I don't expect you to know the nitty-gritty details about beer making and the process steps behind that. Just know that beer making, especially in-home beer making, is becoming much more popular. I have seen at least 2 community events offered through local organizations to promote beer making and teach people how to do it themselves at home. So we are starting to see more of a revolution of in-home cooking, baking, etc. And with that comes beverage manufacture as well. So we aren't exactly like Fort Collins, Colorado, and they have breweries, it seems, on every corner, but we are seeing some rise in interest in that process. So I wanted to give you that insight before you left class. It especially worked out because we ended our discussion of the cereals, grains, and baked goods section on yeast. Yeast is used in the beer making process, and that kind of was a great transition. Now we are going to shift from beer making to other beverages, mainly soda pop. Before we do that, I will say I spent the weekend grading exams. There were some great things on those exams, some things that can be improved. So our class average was 65%, and don't be discouraged with that. That's not necessarily what I expected, but when looking at that grade distribution, there are some good things, mainly that we have more B's and C's, some passing grades, than we do those failing grades. So I want to give you the opportunity to redeem yourself if you feel that's necessary. I will have the exams on Wednesday. I will hand them back. If you feel that you are not comfortable with the grade you earned, you will be given the chance to do exam corrections. Those corrections will be due in class on Friday, and you will have the opportunity to return half the credit or earn half credit back on the questions that you miss. In order to do that, there are 2 things you have to do. First is on any questions you got wrong, you are going to need to select the correct answer. And because this is a take-home exam correction, you are more than willing to work with your teammates that you work with regularly in class, or if you have another friend in class and you want to work together, that's totally fine. I encourage that. Group efforts often lead to a lot more learning successes than we actually realize. So once you select the correct answer, you will then have to provide an explanation as to why your original answer was incorrect. Then part 2 is for you to provide a summary of your study strategy for this exam. And I want you to spend some time reflecting on truly how much you studied. I will not judge you on how much you studied. If it was no time at all and you just came to the class hoping for something great to happen, I honestly just want to hear about it. And really my main goal with this is to allow for you to reflect yourself and hopefully identify some things that you could do differently for exam 2, 3, and the final. I will tell you, these exam corrections will only happen on exam 1. I will not offer the opportunity to do exam corrections on any future quizzes or exams. So take advantage of this while you can. I realize you're all leading busy lives, but if you really feel your score on exam 1 was below what you thought it should be, and you just didn't realize you needed to study more, this is a great opportunity for you to earn points back. A few things I want to say. In the past when I've done this, I've seen some various strategies or methods for getting this done. Some are really not what I'm looking for. So as an example, if we look at exam 1, question 4, I asked you what a bolus was. And so let's say originally I chose answer B. I said a bolus was food that's been mixed in the stomach and is ready to enter the small intestine. That is an incorrect answer. So to earn half credit back, I would say, okay, I need to first select the correct answer. Well, how am I going to reason through choices A, C, D, and E? Well, I'm pretty certain it's not E. Could be, but I'm going to go through options A, C, and D first. A says a treatment pill for heartburn. Well, I remember Mackenzie talking, when we were talking about bolus, it was in the anatomy section, which we did talk about heartburn, but it was really when we were talking about food traveling from mouth down to the esophagus, through all the organs, out the rectum and anus. So I'm pretty certain it's not heartburn. Then if we look at C, food that has been mixed with saliva in the mouth and has moved from mouth down to stomach. That sounds correct. And if I think about it, the answer I chose in B and C are similar, okay? Let's see if I can eliminate D. Flour and water mixture that has the consistency of pancake batter. Well, that we talked about in the cereals, grains, and baked goods section, and I know the bolus was mentioned in the anatomy section, so I'm going to pretty confidently cross out D. So after thinking about it, it looks like C is the better option. And if I go back to my notes, those pre-parties or those mini lectures that I've posted on Wild Courses, I see that food has been mixed with saliva is the bolus. So a bolus is formed at the beginning of the tract. And I know now, after looking at my notes, that food that leaves the stomach is considered chyme, not a bolus. So that is kind of the explanation I want you to propose when completing part 1 of your exam corrections. If in the time that you're going through the exam and making corrections, and you have questions, please feel free to email me or come visit me sometime before Friday in class. Let's now begin our discussion of soda pop. We are going to focus on this for Wednesday and Friday's class. To start, I want to talk about the history of soda pop. It has not been around for ages, but it has been around for a long time. You will see soda pop referred to as a carbonated non-alcoholic beverage. So right around when soda was invented or discovered, there was an intense consumption of alcoholic beverages, so that is where you see the non-alcoholic term come in. It's also termed a soft drink, again, to compare it to hard liquor, which was commonly consumed in the late 1700s, 1800s, when we started really intensifying our consumption of the beverage soda pop. What came about as a soda pop originated from means for trying to recreate the natural effervescence or the bubbliness of mineral-rich waters flowing from European spas. People thought there was a health benefit to these mineral-rich, bubbly waters, and so they were trying to figure out ways to create that bubbliness, that effervescence, to mimic those health properties. Finally, in 1767, Joseph Priestley found a way to man-make carbonated water, essentially bubbly water. So we no longer had to get it from those mineral springs or mineral spas. And he did this by way of acidifying sodium bicarbonate. And so that is why we see soda in soda pop. That's where the name originates. Going a little bit further, more into history, in the 1790s, Joseph Campbell was the first to patent carbonated water. So Priestley didn't patent it. Campbell came along and said, hey, this is my invention. And we see the addition of the word pop after soda because when a bottle is opened, it pops. So people started referring to it as soda pop, and that's what you'll hear today. It's funny, in the northern states, people call it pop. So I would normally call it pop. If I want to pop, I'm going to go to the fridge and take a Dr. Pepper. People in the South, when you say I would like a pop, they'll look at you with a funny look and say, what do you mean by that? So there are different recognitions and different names for the regions in the United States, and it probably varies from country to country as well. Early claims were made to say that soda pepped up tired people, so it woke them up, got them ready for the day, it calmed the nerves, and it made sad people feel happy. So all good things, some things that you might experience on your own when you drink soda pop. And so it was really claimed to be a health drink to help subside some common problems in those 1790s and early 1800s. Originally, it was sold in pharmacies for two reasons. First, again, its medicinal properties or perceived medicinal properties. And secondly, it contained drugs. Those ones being illegal nowadays, but were legal back in the day. Those like heroin, cocaine, and a lot of people are maybe somewhat familiar with Coca-Cola's history as referred to in the name Coca or cocaine. So let's just look at Coca-Cola in particular. John Pemberton of Atlanta, Georgia, invented the caramel syrup that we know and love today in 1886. So Coca-Cola is essentially that syrup that he invented, plus water, plus carbonation. So it's a very simple recipe, although that syrup contains a lot of different ingredients that is highly difficult to try to piece apart, which makes it so that Coca-Cola has a kind of a proprietary recipe. The name Coca came from the cocaine that was originating from the coca leaf that was included in the recipe. Now, cocaine is illegal, so in 1903 that was removed from the syrup. Then cola comes from the cola nut. There's some caffeine in it, and that's where Coca-Cola got its caffeine content. Now, after making the syrup, Coca-Cola patented it in 1893, and the first servings cost about 5 cents a glass, and they sold about 9 a day. If we think today, Coca-Cola is a global company. It depends on where you get it. If you go to McDonald's, $1 soft drink every day, all day, it could be a large or extra large, you're going to get that. We sell about 1.9 billion servings globally a day. So the company has really grown. Lots of changes has happened, particularly those they've brought in other companies. They've bought them out, and they are the brand behind some of those you see at the bottom of the slide. Now we're going to broaden our perspective and think soft drinks in general, no longer just looking at Coke, but soft drinks in general are made up of certain ingredients. The list, as simply put, is water, carbon dioxide, sugar, flavorings, colors, and acids. We go Pepsi. We are going to use Pepsi as our model, mainly because it is manufactured and canned in Worland, Wyoming. So that is why Pepsi is the official soft drink of the Wyoming Cowboys football games, whatever sporting events. Myself, as a food catering advisor for the Food Science Club, we are only authorized to purchase Pepsi products if we do caterings on campus. So that is why we're going to use Pepsi. To me, Pepsi is enjoyable. Not my favorite, but still a very good soft drink. Looking at the ingredient list on the back, and I've put it on the slide for you, but Pepsi, 1 can is 1 serving. It has 150 calories, 0 grams of fat, 30 milligrams of sodium, 41 grams of total carbs, and 0 grams of protein. Now, on a current food label, the new food label standards requires the food or beverage to include added sugars. So if we look at Pepsi, all 41 grams of those total carbohydrates are from added sugars. So there's no natural sugars like we would see maybe in orange juice that has natural sugar from the orange that is used for manufacture. I've also included an ingredient list, and for those who have not picked up or don't necessarily know this yet, ingredients are listed from the highest quantity to the lowest quantity in that food. So number 1 ingredient is carbonated water. We will see why water is so important. Then we have high fructose corn syrup, caramel color, sugar, phosphoric acid, caffeine, citric acid, and natural flavor. I've paired each of those with the general basic ingredient that you'll see. So sugar, we've got 2 forms of those. Natural flavorings would be included flavorings, and you don't necessarily have to specify on the ingredient label because that would give away the recipe. We also have acids, so all of those are represented in this 1 can of Pepsi. Let's go through each of those ingredients individually, starting with water because it is the largest ingredient used in Pepsi. It contains usually, and this is a generalization because there are tons of different soft drinks, tons of different options, but 92% of the volume of the soft drink is water. So you are essentially consuming water in a different form that contains other things. We must ensure that this water is chemically pure when we're manufacturing a soda. It's extremely important because traces of impurities can react with other ingredients in the soda and cause changes, most likely undesirable changes. And they're undesirable because they are not, we cannot account for them before as we're making that recipe. Those changes happen afterwards, and then we have to figure out why and how that affected our total recipe. So if we look at some of those changes, if water has a certain acidity or basicity, alkalinity, that pH change can alter the flavor. It can also mess with shelf stability, so we might not be able to store that soda for as long as we originally thought if the water has pH changes. If there is excessive iron or manganese, that can cause color or flavor changes. Again, not a great thing. Chlorine is probably the one we have to deal with most because municipalities add a little bit of chlorine to the water, and that can affect flavor. And then whether or not we have solids that affect turbidity can affect overall color. Not necessarily a huge problem in dark soda drinks, but things like Sprite and 7-Up, that can cause some really big consumer perception issues. Like I said, municipal water is used for sodas, but oftentimes it's not chemically pure enough. And so that doesn't mean it's not safe for us to consume. Please keep consuming Laramie's water because it is safe. Microorganisms have been eliminated from them, and that's why it's safe. There are, however, still chemicals in that water, like, for instance, fluoride or chlorine. And so if a bottling company is using municipal water, they might run into problems. So therefore, bottling companies often condition their own water. So they bring water in from the municipality, the city that they're in, and they filter and clean that themselves to ensure that they are starting with the best raw ingredient that they know they have control over. So they'll run chemical precipitation, the minerals, they'll deionize the water, they'll add some charcoal to help remove odors and flavors, they'll filter it so any sediment that might be in there, it will be caught in that filter. So again, water is super important to causing the right flavor to show up at the consumer's mouth or palate, one that you know you have control over as a bottling company or as a soda manufacturer. Next is carbon dioxide. This is what makes soda pop. That bubbly, fizzy mouthfeel is what people most often desire. When I crave a soda, my craving stems from wanting something that's a little more exciting in my mouth than just your average water or iced tea. The purpose of adding carbon dioxide goes beyond that, though. We do see some improvement in flavor. I think it's because you just get a stronger flavor because the mouth is excited when it feels that carbon dioxide turn from liquid to gas. It also helps acidity, which lends preservative qualities. And we also think about that iconic Coke commercial where you have a glass of Coke sitting in front of you on the TV screen and it's just bubbly and it looks just oh so refreshing. So those are some of the purposes for adding CO2. We don't add the exact same amount of CO2 to every type of soda. So Dr. Pepper might have more or less CO2 than Pepsi, which might have more or less than Sprite or 7-Up. So that's brand specific. And let's think about what is actually happening to CO2 in the can or the bottle and then after we open it. An unopened soda is nearly bubble free, especially if it's just been sitting on the shelf and not been disturbed. And why is that? Because CO2 that we have added is in the liquid phase. And we have pressurized that because CO2 can only be in the liquid phase at high enough pressures and cold enough temperatures. So we've pressurized it to cause that CO2 to mix with the water. Then as we open it, that bottle or can, we release pressure, which allows that pressure to release and the CO2 to become gaseous form away from the liquid form. So that's why we see the bubbles. That's why we hear that loud kind of fizz on the first opening of the bottle or the can. Now, if we think about it, some of us have probably shaken a Coke bottle, or this is the same for beer because beer is slightly pressurized. You shake a beer bottle before giving it to your friend. That any CO2 in that beverage is still in the liquid form. As we shake it, we're adding energy. So we need energy to move from the liquid to the gas phase. We add a lot of energy by shaking it, and I'm not going to do this because this is my afternoon snack. We add energy to the drink, and as soon as we open it, that has to be released in excess amount of gas. So that's why we see bubbling or fizzing over on a shaken can or bottle. Next, we have sugar. Sugar can come in many different amounts in different types or brands of soda, 8 to 14%. The function of sugar is to first and foremost add sweetness. Pop is not pop without sweetness. If you like seltzer water, you're going to get that carbonated effect. You're just not going to get the sweetness. With the addition of sugar, we see the addition of calories, but at the same time, we have a different body and mouth feel as we consume that soda. Historically, we have used sucrose in its colorless syrup form. So we've added water, created a syrup. Nowadays, we use more high fructose corn syrup because it's much more stable in acidic drinks, and it's cheaper and sweeter. Okay, so we made the switch because it's sweeter, so we have to add less and it becomes more cost effective. So Jake Loger had the question a couple weeks ago, what's the big hype around high fructose corn syrup? Why does it have a bad rap? Well, let's think about what it is first. It comes from cornstarch. And remember, starch, whether it's amylose or amylopectin, is only over glucose. So it's essentially glucose. But when we take that cornstarch, we add an enzyme to convert some of that glucose to fructose, another monosaccharide. So high fructose corn syrup is merely just water, glucose, and fructose. And so we have HFCS, high fructose corn syrup 42 and 55, two different levels of fructose. 42 has 42% fructose and the rest is glucose. 55 has 55% fructose and the rest is glucose. We use the higher fructose in soft drinks very commonly because, again, we want that sweetness. It becomes more efficient on the economic side to use fructose rather than glucose. Some people wonder if fructose is digested or metabolized differently in the body, meaning it might skip some steps, doesn't trigger insulin, so it can't help modulate blood glucose levels. That is a theory. It is still being researched today. Others say that because fructose and glucose are still found in just table sugar, if we remember that from our yeast lecture, that high fructose corn syrup is no different than sugar. So really that obesity epidemic or that diabetic epidemic that we might be seeing over the last few decades is really not from high fructose corn syrup, but just the addition of excess sugar in our foods. So it's still up in the air about whether high fructose corn syrup is really bad for you or if it's just total added sugar that's bad for you. Moving on to flavorings, we can use synthetic flavor compounds and add it to sodas. We can use natural flavor extracts, or we can use fruit juice concentrates. I've given you a label for raspberry flavored formulation. So this is just the flavor, and you will see over, I think there are 18 or 20 different compounds just to make that one raspberry flavor. So it can be very involved. In this Pepsi can, we see that it just lists natural flavoring. So the FDA has approved us to say just natural labeling on the label as long as certain things are met, and we as consumers don't have to worry about. The FDA regulates that. One thing about flavors, it must be stable under acidic conditions. So let's say on that list, isobutyl acetate was not stable under an acidic condition. That flavor would change in the Pepsi because Pepsi has an acid. It also has to be stable under light exposure. This is mainly important for bottled drinks that are exposed to light on the retail shelves. Oftentimes, synthetic or man-made flavors are stronger and easier to manage from a manufacturer's side than natural flavors or fruit juices. Color comes in two different forms, synthetic or non-synthetic. Synthetic colors, which are made by manufacturers, so Pepsi probably doesn't make its own color. They're probably buying a color from another company. I had a student whose dad made colors and that's all his company did, and he sold it to people like Pepsi or Coke. These synthetic colors must be approved by FDA. They have to be approved to be safe before they can be put into food or beverage. That includes chemical purity standards. We're not going to go into those. It's very involved, but you know that any color added to something you can buy at a grocery store, buy at a retail establishment, has been approved and deemed safe by the FDA. There are also non-synthetic colors, caramel color, which is what we see in Pepsi and Dr. Pepper, and I think Coke as well. These are just created by heating sugar, so it's a natural color. It's only used in dark sodas. We don't see that in Sprite or 7-Up. Next is acid. We can get acid from two things. First is the carbon dioxide. So just by carbonating liquid, we are going to get some acid production. We also are going to add some acids, and I would say most soft drinks have added acids. The ones I've listed here in blue are natural forms of acid. So citric acid is the most common. It comes from natural sources like citrus fruits, and so it's very easily added. The ones in black are synthetic acids, still again approved to be safe by the FDA. The purpose of adding acid is to enhance flavor, is to really extrapolate those flavors when a consumer swallows that soft drink. It can also be used to preserve microbial growth. So we want sodas to be considered safe. We don't want bacteria to grow in them. And so means of doing that is to decrease the pH, have a low acidity, and this causes bacteria not to be able to grow. However, we're not really adding acid in too high of amounts to say it's going to fully preserve that soda pop. It's just an added additional bonus. We don't have any on this Pepsi label, but most commonly is sodium benzoate or potassium benzoate, which actually, no, we do not have any potassium benzoate in this. And then lastly, one thing I just want to talk about, because we're talking about soda, which is commonly caffeinated. If we look at these Pepsis, regular Pepsi has 38 milligrams per serving. Diet Pepsi has a little bit less. And so essentially what caffeine is a stimulant. So early in the 1700s, when Priestley was developing that carbonated water and when soda was originally patented, they found that there was a demand for it because some of that caffeine caused people to feel more awake, to feel happy rather than sad. So that stimulant is essentially a boost of energy. It also is a diuretic, meaning it's going to cause you to pee a little more often than you would if you drank just water. And some people say too much caffeine is a bad thing, and I would agree, but it has been proven to be that 400 milligrams per day is fine. So that's 20 of these 12-ounce cans. I hope you're not drinking 20 of these 12-ounce cans because your sugar would be out the roof. Okay. Let's now look at the difference between Pepsi and Diet Pepsi. So I brought in my Diet Pepsi. I don't necessarily drink Diet Pepsi. I think there's a little bit different taste, so I prefer the regular, but a lot of people have transitioned to the diet sodas, and for good reason. So if we look at that ingredient list, we see I've boxed some differences. So we've removed all of the sugar in Diet Pepsi. There's no high fructose corn syrup, and no sugar or sucrose. So we've taken all that. That's going to remove a lot of the calories. So we see 0 calories for Diet Pepsi. But we've also added 2 things, sucralose and acesulfame. That's how you say it. I struggled first too. And so we're going to talk about both of those individually. A question that should come to mind right now is, what is sucralose? Sucralose is essentially Splenda. So if you've used Splenda to bake with, or you've used Splenda to put in your coffee while you're at a restaurant, you are using sucralose. Sucralose is a sucrose derivative. So I have 2 diagrams here. Find my mouse. This top one being table sugar. This should look familiar to you. We have talked about sucrose being a disaccharide. If you don't remember that, refer back to your yeast video lecture that I recorded. Then below it, we have sucralose. So you'll notice that 3 things are different. We have essentially taken the hydroxyl groups, so these OH groups, 3 of them on this sucrose molecule, and replace them with chlorine, that's the Cl. So by doing that, our taste buds detect much greater sweetness when there are 3 chlorine rather than those original 3 oxygen or hydroxyl groups. So we can use much less sucralose to get the same amount of sweetness as we do with table sugar or sucrose. So we're still going to consume the calorie of sucralose, but we have to use far less amounts, so it's not going to be hardly any calories at all. We still consider this a nutritive sweetener because we are getting some calories. In looking at the sweetness ratio of those, we see here sucralose is 600 times sweeter than table sugar. So table sugar is kind of our standard 1.0. So we can use 1/600th of the amount of sucrose to get, or sucralose, to get the same sweetness as we get for sucrose. That is why we see it used in diet soft drinks and diet foods. One other compound on this table that might also look familiar is this glucose and fructose. Remember when we're talking about high fructose corn syrup, fructose is sweeter. It's a sweetness ratio of 1.2 to 1.8, whereas glucose only has a sweetness ratio of 0.7. So again, why do we use high fructose corn syrup in soda? Because it's sweeter, we can use less of it, and therefore we can buy less and use less money. One thing I also want to point out, and you're probably familiar with this term, aspartame. That is heavily used in the soft drinks. We just don't happen to have it in Pepsi, but in others, Diet Pepsi. But some people are familiar with that, so let's talk about that compound. If you're thinking a little packet that you would find at a table at a restaurant, it would be Equal or NutraSweet. Asking again what it is, it's a nutritive sweetener, meaning we are going to get some calories from it. We can still digest it. However, it is much sweeter than regular table sugar. We see here 180 to 200 times sweeter than table sugar. That's why we can use much less of it than we do table sugar. It is essentially 2 amino acids, phenylalanine and aspartic acid, put together. So when we break that down, our bodies will say, oh, it's 2 amino acids. If for every gram that we consume, it's a protein, we're going to get 4 calories. So again, we're going to get calories from it. One question that is commonly asked is aspartame bad for you? And some people believe it is, some believe that it is not, and I'm on the it is not side, because if we think about it, aspartame is essentially 2 amino acids. In breaking that apart in our small intestine, we are creating 2 different amino acids that can be used for normal body function. Now, in that break apart, we also get methanol. Some people believe that methanol is the potential carcinogenic agent, meaning it could cause cancer. However, methanol is also a byproduct of protein breakdown when we break down meat, any proteins in milk, any proteins in fruits and vegetables. So it's a byproduct of protein breakdown, not just aspartame breakdown. So, but when our body consumes aspartame and we break that down, the methanol we are producing is so minuscule, very, very minuscule. So the FDA says, well, it's okay to intake 20 12-ounce diet sodas because you're still under your allowable aspartame intake. So again, I hope you are not drinking 20 of these because you've got other added sugar problems. Well, there's no sugar in this, but again, that's a lot of soft drink to drink. There's a lot of allowance for the aspartame amount. If you're interested in the argument here, I've put some resources there. Feel free to go check it out yourself. Then finally, I promise this is the last slide. I realize we're going on 30 some minutes, but acetylsulfame, potassium. Acetylsulfame K is sometimes how you'll see it referred to, or ACE-K. This is a non-nutritive sweetener, meaning we will not get any calories by consuming this compound. And we don't get calories because it's not metabolized in our body. Our small intestine cannot break ACE-K down. And so therefore it just passes through our large intestine and out. However, it is sweet. Our taste buds get the sweetness, but a negative drawback is that it has a very bitter aftertaste. So that is why we're adding acetylsulfame, potassium, and sucralose in this Diet Pepsi, is so we can kind of counteract the bitter taste by adding sucralose. We commonly see ACE-K used in baked goods because it's heat stable. Other sugar derivatives like sucralose or saccharin are not heat stable, so we couldn't put them in the oven. We'd have some serious taste problems if we did, but Ace K is, so that's why you'll see it on some baked good products. All right, I promise I'm done. I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday and hope you're ready for some group work to further discover soda pops.